the 17th of January 1940. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The morning air hangs heavy with frost. Across the barren testing field, a solitary figure in olive drab stands hunched against the wind, gripping a contraption that looks more like a plumber's nightmare than a weapon of war. Metal tanks press against his back. A rubber hose snakes down to a crude nozzle in his gloved hands. An engineer in a wool overcoat checks his stopwatch, nods, and steps back. The soldier pulls the trigger. Nothing happens. He shakes the mechanism, tries again. A weak dribble of ignited fuel sputters forth, barely reaching 10 feet before the flame dies in the cold wind. The test is over in seconds. The engineer marks his clipboard with a disappointed scratch of pencil on paper. In the distance, the low rumble of artillery practice echoes across the frozen Chesapeake watershed. America, in January of 1940, possesses the most productive industrial economy on Earth. Factories capable of producing automobiles, refrigerators, radios by the millions, but it cannot produce a working, portable flamethrower, not one that meets any combat standard, not one that any commander would trust to send into battle. This is the strange truth of American military unpreparedness on the eve of global conflagration. While European armies have been mechanizing, modernizing, and testing their doctrines in the crucible of actual war, the United States Army remains a constabulary force of barely 190,000 men, equipped with weapons designed during the previous World War, operating under tactical manuals that still reference horse cavalry as a primary offensive arm. The flamethrower, that terrible innovation of trench warfare, remains a curiosity in American arsenals, experimental, unreliable, unstandardized. There is no doctrine for its employment. There are no training programs. There are no factories tooled to manufacture them in quantity. The few prototypes that exist are museum pieces and laboratory experiments, relics of 1918 gathering dust in ordnance depots. And yet, within 5 years, American forces will deploy tens of thousands of these weapons across 2 oceans, refining them into instruments of tactical necessity so essential that no Pacific Island assault will be contemplated without them. The transformation from complete absence to mass production, from theoretical curiosity to frontline standard, represents one of the remarkable technical and doctrinal evolutions in modern military history. But in January of 1940, as that engineer at Aberdeen makes his disappointing notes, none of this is foreseeable. The weapon does not exist. The need has not yet been understood. The war that will demand it has not yet touched American shores. The flamethrower's absence from American military planning reflects a deeper strategic blindness, a fundamental misunderstanding of what the coming war will actually require. American military thinking in 1940 remains anchored in the lessons of 1918, the war of trenches, barbed wire, and massed artillery. The Chemical Warfare Service, the organizational heir to the gas and flame weapons of the Great War, maintains theoretical interest in incendiary devices. But there is no urgency, no funding, no industrial base devoted to development. The few flamethrower experiments conducted in the interwar years produce unwieldy devices that weigh upwards of 70 pounds, fully fueled, require 2 men to operate, and malfunction with dispiriting regularity. Range is pathetic, 30 feet at best. Ignition systems fail in damp conditions. Fuel tanks leak. The weapons are dangerous to their operators, prone to catastrophic failure if struck by enemy fire. No soldier wants to carry one. No commander wants to rely on one. In war games and tactical exercises, they are footnotes, experimental curiosities tested and set aside. The institutional memory of the Great War remembers flamethrowers primarily as German weapons, terrifying but ultimately ineffective against prepared defenses, more psychological than practical. American doctrine, such as it exists, dismisses them as specialty items of limited utility. But military necessity has a way of reshaping doctrine with brutal swiftness. As Hitler's Wehrmacht smashes through Poland in September 1939, then turns west toward France in the spring of 1940, American military observers begin filing reports that will fundamentally alter strategic thinking. The German Blitzkrieg doctrine combined arms warfare, emphasizing speed, shock, and the penetration of enemy defenses, demonstrates the obsolescence of static defensive thinking. French fortifications, those elaborate concrete works of the Maginot Line, prove irrelevant when the enemy simply goes around them. The lesson is clear. Modern war demands mobility, flexibility, combined arms integration. But there is a secondary lesson, less obvious but equally important. As German forces reduce Belgian forts and French pillboxes, they employ specialized assault teams equipped with flamethrowers, satchel charges, and concentrated firepower to neutralize hardened positions. The flamethrower, far from being obsolete, proves essential for close assault against fortified defenses. This observation lodges in the minds of forward-thinking American officers, filed away for future reference. But in 1940, with France collapsing and Britain fighting for survival, the American Army's flamethrower program remains dormant, unfunded, unstandardized. The attack on Pearl Harbor changes everything. The 7th of December, 1941, transforms the United States from a neutral observer into a combatant nation, and the pace of military transformation accelerates with stunning velocity. Within months, the War Department begins the largest and most rapid military expansion in human history. An army of 190,000 must become an army of millions. Weapons must be designed, tested, standardized, and produced by the tens of thousands. Tactical doctrines must be written, training programs established, supply chains organized. In this frenzy of mobilization, the flamethrower remains a low priority until the first reports begin filtering back from the Pacific. Guadalcanal, August 1942. Marines assault Japanese positions dug into coral ridges and jungle hillsides. The enemy does not fight like the Germans. There are no grand maneuvers, no armored thrusts, no attempts to outflank and encircle. Instead, the Japanese have perfected a different kind of warfare defense in depth, mutually supporting bunkers and pillboxes, camouflaged firing positions carved into reverse slopes where artillery cannot reach them. American forces, attacking with rifle fire and grenades, suffer appalling casualties for minimal gains. A Marine platoon can spend an entire day trying to reduce a single bunker, taking casualties with each attempt, only to discover that the position is part of a network, that suppressing one firing point merely exposes the attackers to fire from another. The Japanese defenders, understanding they cannot win through maneuver, have committed to a strategy of attrition, making the Americans pay in blood for every yard of jungle, every coral ridge. The Marines learn quickly that conventional infantry tactics are murderously ineffective against these fortified positions. What they need, what they desperately require, are specialized weapons for close assault. Bangalore torpedoes to blow obstacles, satchel charges to destroy bunkers, and flamethrowers to burn out positions that cannot be taken any other way. But the flamethrowers do not exist. Not in sufficient numbers. Not in reliable form. A few Marine units carry experimental devices, improvised versions cobbled together from salvaged parts and civilian equipment. These weapons are temperamental, dangerous, barely adequate. After-action reports from Guadalcanal make the deficiency painfully clear. Company commanders write urgent requests for flamethrowers. Battalion officers forward these requests with endorsements. Regimental reports classify the flamethrower as an essential weapon for jungle warfare. By the time these reports reach Washington, the Chemical Warfare Service is already scrambling to respond, but the industrial and technical groundwork simply does not exist. There are no production contracts, no standardized designs, no training manuals. The weapon must be invented, essentially from scratch, and invented under the pressure of wartime urgency. The Chemical Warfare Service turns to the private sector, to engineers and designers who can translate battlefield requirements into manufacturable hardware. The challenge is deceptively complex. A portable flamethrower must balance contradictory demands, sufficient fuel capacity for multiple bursts, yet light enough for one man to carry and operate. Adequate range to strike enemy positions from relative safety, yet not so powerful that it becomes uncontrollable. Reliable ignition in the humidity and mud of jungle warfare. Durable construction that can survive the abuse of combat conditions. Simple operation that can be mastered by infantry soldiers with minimal training. And, crucially, it must be safe enough that soldiers will actually agree to carry it, because no weapon is useful if troops refuse to operate it out of fear for their own lives. The solution, when it emerges from laboratories and testing grounds in late 1942, represents a masterpiece of practical engineering. The M1 portable flamethrower consists of 3 pressure cylinders worn on the operator's back, 2 containing thickened fuel, 1 containing compressed nitrogen as propellant. A rubber hose connects to a handheld nozzle and ignition system. The fuel is not raw gasoline, but a specially formulated napalm mixture, thickened with aluminum soaps to give it adhesive properties and longer burn time. When triggered, the weapon projects a stream of ignited fuel approximately 40 yards, far enough to strike enemy positions without exposing the operator to immediate rifle fire. The flame is not a brief spurt, but a sustained jet that can be directed into bunker apertures, trenches, and cave openings. Total fuel capacity allows for approximately 10 seconds of continuous operation or multiple shorter bursts. Fully loaded, the weapon weighs 70 pounds, but this is distributed across the operator's back in a frame similar to a backpack, making it manageable for fit infantry soldiers. Crucially, the weapon is relatively safe for its operator. The fuel tanks are positioned below shoulder level, reducing the risk of catastrophic failure from enemy fire, and the ignition system is mechanically simple, unlikely to malfunction. By early 1943, the M1 flamethrower enters mass production. Contracts go out to defense manufacturers. Training programs are established at infantry schools. Technical manuals are written and distributed. Supply chains are organized to ensure availability in forward theaters. Within 18 months of Guadalcanal, the weapon that did not exist has become standard equipment. But the existence of the weapon is only the first step. Doctrine must be developed how to employ the flamethrower tactically, how to integrate it into combined arms operations, how to train soldiers to use it effectively. The Chemical Warfare Service establishes flamethrower training schools at Fort Benning and Camp Lejeune, where infantry soldiers learn the technical operation of the weapon and the tactical principles of close assault. The training is rigorous and deeply practical. Trainees practice on mock-up bunkers and pillboxes, learning to coordinate with rifle squads and demolition teams. They learn to approach enemy positions using terrain and covering fire, to strike from oblique angles where bunker defenders have limited fields of fire. They learn that the flamethrower is not a standalone weapon, but part of an assault team, riflemen to provide covering fire, engineers to place demolition charges, flamethrower operators to burn out positions that cannot be reduced any other way. The psychological dimension of the training is equally important. Instructors must overcome the natural fear of carrying an explosive fuel tank into combat. Soldiers are shown the safety features, the relative protection offered by the tank placement, the statistical unlikelihood of catastrophic failure. They are taught to think of the flamethrower not as a death trap, but as a tool that saves lives by reducing bunkers without prolonged frontal assaults. Gradually, through repetition and realistic training, the fear diminishes. Soldiers begin to volunteer for flamethrower duty, understanding its tactical importance. The first large-scale employment of the standardized M1 flamethrower comes in the Central Pacific Campaign, beginning with the assault on Tarawa Atoll in November 1943. The battle is a bloodbath. Japanese defenders have fortified the tiny island with hundreds of bunkers and firing positions, concrete and coconut log structures that resist artillery bombardment and naval gunfire. Marines wading ashore through chest-deep water face murderous fire from positions they cannot see and cannot suppress. The casualty rates are staggering: more than 3,000 American casualties in 76 hours of fighting. But amidst the carnage, the flamethrower proves its worth. Marine assault teams, working methodically through the Japanese defenses, use flamethrowers to neutralize bunkers that had resisted every other weapon. The technique is brutally effective. A rifle squad provides suppressive fire, while flamethrower operators maneuver to flanking positions, then direct sustained bursts of ignited napalm into bunker apertures. The flame does not merely kill, it consumes oxygen, creates intolerable heat, fills enclosed spaces with toxic smoke. Japanese defenders have three choices: burn, suffocate, or flee into the open where they are cut down by rifle fire. Few bunkers can withstand a direct flamethrower attack. After-action reports from Tarawa are unanimous. The flamethrower is essential for reducing fortified positions in island warfare. The weapon that did not exist in 1940 has become, by late 1943, the most important tactical tool for close assault in the Pacific theater. The lessons of Tarawa reshape American tactical doctrine for the island-hopping campaign. Every subsequent amphibious assault includes specialized flamethrower units, integrated into assault teams with demolition engineers and rifle squads. The weapons are issued not just to Marine Corps units, but to Army infantry divisions preparing for Pacific operations. Production increases dramatically by 1944. American factories are producing thousands of M1 flamethrowers monthly, enough to equip multiple divisions simultaneously. Improved versions emerge from the testing grounds. The M1, A1 with refined ignition systems and better fuel mixtures, the M2 with increased range and capacity. Engineers experiment with vehicle-mounted versions for use by tanks and amphibious tractors. The Chemical Warfare Service establishes field depots in forward areas, ensuring ready availability of fuel and replacement parts. By mid-1944, the flamethrower has become so thoroughly integrated into American tactical doctrine that assault plans are written around its employment. Intelligence officers identify hardened positions on pre-assault maps. Operations officers assign flamethrower teams to specific targets. Rehearsals on rear area beaches include practice assaults with live flamethrowers against mock-up defenses. The transformation is complete. A weapon that did not exist has become indispensable. The soldiers who carry these weapons into combat experience a unique psychological burden. To be a flamethrower operator is to be marked, to carry a weapon that draws particular hatred from enemy defenders. Japanese soldiers are trained to target flamethrower operators with priority fire, understanding that eliminating the flamethrower eliminates the most dangerous threat to their bunkers. Operators know this. They know that the tanks on their backs make them conspicuous targets, that enemy snipers and machine gunners will focus fire on them specifically. The fear is constant and reasonable. Yet men volunteer for the duty, again and again, throughout the Pacific campaign. Some are motivated by tactical understanding. They have seen friends die in futile frontal assaults on bunkers, and they understand that the flamethrower offers a better way. Some are motivated by darker impulses, by anger and desire for revenge after months of brutal combat. Some simply accept it as a necessary job, no different than point man or machine gunner, a role that must be filled for the unit to function. Whatever their motivations, these men form a distinct brotherhood, flamethrower operators across different units, sharing a common experience that sets them apart from other infantrymen. They train together, share technical knowledge, develop small rituals and superstitions around the weapon's use. They paint names on their fuel tanks, personal markings that transform military equipment into something more intimate. And they carry, always, the knowledge that they wield one of the most feared weapons on the battlefield, a weapon that grants them tremendous power at tremendous personal risk. The Pacific War becomes, in many ways, a testing ground for flamethrower tactics, each battle refining doctrine and technique. At Saipan in June 1944, American forces encounter Japanese defenses even more elaborate than Tarawa, entire hillsides honeycombed with caves and tunnels. Conventional weapons prove almost useless against these positions. Artillery bombardment merely collapses cave entrances, which defenders reopen under cover of darkness. Flamethrower teams develop new techniques, combining flame with demolition charges to ensure positions stay sealed, using prolonged burns to consume oxygen deep within cave complexes. coordinating with tanks mounting flamethrowers to reach positions beyond infantry range. At Peleliu in September 1944, the Japanese defense reaches its most sophisticated form. Defenders have abandoned the suicidal banzai charges of earlier battles, instead adopting a strategy of pure attrition, fighting from fortified positions until annihilated. American casualties are horrific, but flamethrower teams prove essential to reducing the elaborate cave defenses of Bloody Nose Ridge. By Iwo Jima in February 1945, flamethrower doctrine has reached full maturity. The island's volcanic terrain allows Japanese defenders to construct thousands of bunkers, pillboxes, and cave positions, all mutually supporting, all designed for maximum defense. American forces deploy flamethrower teams on an unprecedented scale. Every assault company includes multiple operators. Tank-mounted flamethrowers support infantry advances. Engineers devise specialized techniques for sealing caves. The battle is still murderously costly, but without flamethrowers it would have been impossible. Every after-action analysis reaches the same conclusion. The flamethrower has become the essential weapon for reducing fortified positions. But the flamethrower's tactical utility comes with profound moral and psychological costs. This is not a clean weapon, not a device that kills quickly or efficiently. It burns. It immolates. It creates deaths of particular horror, and the men who wield it are forced to confront this horror directly. There are no after-action reports that capture this dimension of the weapon's use, no official documents that record the psychological weight of burning other human beings alive. But it exists in letters home, in post-combat journals, in the 1,000-yard stares of flamethrower operators photographed after battle. Some men break under the weight of it, refuse to continue operating the weapon despite the tactical necessity. Some become hardened, develop psychological mechanisms to distance themselves from the reality of what they are doing. Some simply endure, carrying the burden because the alternative, prolonged assault, higher casualties among their fellow soldiers, is unacceptable. The flamethrower, for all its tactical effectiveness, exacts a price from those who employ it, a price measured not in casualties or equipment losses, but in pieces of humanity surrendered to the necessities of war. As the Pacific War enters its final months, American forces prepare for the invasion of Japan itself, Operation Downfall, the largest amphibious assault ever contemplated. Intelligence estimates predict that Japanese home islands will be defended by millions of soldiers and armed civilians, fighting from prepared positions with the desperation of those defending their homeland. American planners, studying these estimates, understand that the invasion will require flamethrowers on a scale never before seen. Contracts go out for expanded production. Training programs are accelerated. Specialized units are formed, entire companies equipped primarily with flamethrowers and demolitions for the specific purpose of reducing fortified positions. Chemical warfare service engineers design new variants, improved range, higher capacity, better protection for operators. By mid-1945, American industry is producing flamethrowers at a rate that would have seemed impossible in 1940, thousands of weapons monthly flowing into supply depots across the Pacific. The weapon that did not exist 5 years earlier has become so central to American tactical doctrine that the invasion of Japan is planned around its mass employment. Every assault division will carry hundreds of flamethrowers. Every beach landing includes flamethrower teams in the first waves. The weapon has evolved from experimental curiosity to the foundation of infantry assault tactics. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 end the war before Operation Downfall begins, before the mass employment of flamethrowers in the invasion of Japan can occur. But the weapon's evolution continues beyond the war's end. In Korea, flamethrowers prove essential for reducing North Korean and Chinese bunkers in the mountainous terrain. In Vietnam, flamethrowers see limited use in jungle warfare before being largely supplanted by more modern incendiary weapons. The M1 and M2 flamethrowers remain in American military inventory into the 1,970 seconds, refined and improved, but fundamentally unchanged from the design standardized in 1943. And then gradually, they disappear from frontline service, replaced by thermobaric weapons and precision-guided munitions, by technologies that can achieve similar effects without requiring a soldier to carry 70 pounds of explosive fuel into close combat. By the end of the 20th century, the portable flamethrower has vanished from Western military arsenals, remembered primarily as a weapon of World War II, a terrible but necessary tool of a terrible and necessary war. But the story of the flamethrower's development reveals deeper truths about American military adaptation, about the transformation of doctrine under the pressure of necessity. In January 1940, the United States possessed no portable flamethrowers, no industrial capacity to produce them, no tactical doctrine for their employment, no training programs to teach soldiers their use. 5 years later, American forces had deployed tens of thousands of these weapons across 2 oceans, had refined their employment into sophisticated combined arms tactics, had made them essential to infantry operations. The speed and scale of this transformation testifies to American industrial capacity, certainly, but also to institutional flexibility, to the ability to recognize necessity and respond with overwhelming force. The Chemical Warfare Service, starting from essentially nothing, created not just a weapon, but an entire system design, production, distribution, training, tactical doctrine, in the space of 3 years. This is the hidden strength of American military power in World War II, not merely the ability to produce equipment in vast quantities, but the ability to identify deficiencies, develop solutions, and implement them with startling rapidity. The flamethrower also reveals darker truths about the nature of modern warfare, about the weapons that necessity demands and the costs they exact from those who employ them. There is no glory in flamethrower operations, no heroic narrative that fits comfortably with traditional military virtues. The weapon succeeds through terror and immolation, through the creation of deaths so horrible that enemy soldiers would rather face rifle fire than endure the flame. American soldiers who operated these weapons understood this, carried this understanding with them for the rest of their lives. Many never spoke of their service, could not articulate what it meant to burn other human beings alive, even when tactical necessity demanded it. The flamethrower represents warfare stripped of all romance, reduced to its essential brutality, the application of violence so overwhelming that resistance becomes impossible. That American forces employed these weapons effectively, integrated them into doctrine, produced them by the thousands, speaks to a willingness to embrace any tool that might shorten the war and reduce overall casualties. But it also speaks to the moral compromises inherent in total war, to the recognition that sometimes the most effective weapon is also the most terrible. In the decades after World War II, military historians and veterans alike have struggled with the legacy of the flamethrower, with what its employment says about American warfare and American character. Some have justified it purely in tactical terms. It was the most effective weapon against fortified positions. It saved American lives by reducing the need for prolonged frontal assaults. Its use was militarily necessary, given the nature of Japanese defensive tactics. Others have condemned it as unnecessarily cruel, as a weapon that violated basic principles of humane warfare, that caused suffering beyond what was required for military victory. Both perspectives contain truth. The flamethrower was tactically necessary, probably saved thousands of American lives by making island assaults more efficient. It was also undeniably cruel, created deaths of particular horror, extracted psychological costs from those who employed it. These truths coexist uneasily, like so much else about World War II, that conflict where moral clarity about ends existed alongside moral ambiguity about means. What remains indisputable is the transformation itself, the arc from absence to standardization, from experimental curiosity to frontline necessity. On that cold January morning in 1940, when the test at Aberdeen Proving Ground produced only a pathetic sputter of flame, no observer could have predicted that within 5 years this weapon would become central to American tactical doctrine, that tens of thousands would be produced and deployed, that entire battles would be planned around its employment. The transformation required not just industrial capacity but institutional imagination, the ability to recognize that the coming war would demand weapons and tactics far different from those of the previous conflict. It required flexibility, the willingness to overturn established doctrine when battlefield reality demanded it. It required courage, both from the planners who authorized mass production of an unproven weapon and from the soldiers who agreed to carry it into combat despite the obvious dangers. And it required the acceptance of moral ambiguity, the recognition that sometimes the most effective tool is also the most terrible, and that in total war, effectiveness often trumps all other considerations. The flamethrower, that weapon that did not exist in 1940, became by war's end one of the most iconic and controversial tools of American military power. Its flame lit the darkness of Pacific Island nights, illuminated the interiors of Japanese bunkers and caves, created imagery that would define the brutal reality of close combat in World War II. The weapon burned not just enemy positions but also its way into the American military consciousness, becoming synonymous with the ruthless efficiency of American infantry tactics, with the willingness to employ any tool that might bring victory closer. And when victory came, when the war ended and the weapons were mothballed and eventually discarded, the flamethrower remained in memory, a symbol of warfare at its most elemental and its most terrible, a reminder that sometimes the distance between peace and total war is measured not in years or months, but in the speed with which a nation can transform absence into abundance, can create from nothing the tools that necessity demands, no matter how terrible those tools might be.